Ironside will not be seen tonight, so we may bring you the following special program.
Welcome back, everybody. It's time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suttress with you. I'm happy to welcome Dr. Stanford Carpenter to Word Balloon. Stanford has a PhD and is doing some really cool stuff that we're going to be talking about tonight. And just in time for Juneteenth, in fact, he is the man behind Comicpalooza University. And good to see you, Stanford. Welcome to Word Balloon.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is going to be fun. I'm really excited to have you on, and hopefully with the programs that you're proposing, perhaps one day in the future, we'll have an actual Comicpalooza University. There you go. How about it? That's the
That is the dream. That truly is the dream.
So you got your PhD at Rice University?
Yes, I did my PhD in anthropology. I was put in a really unique situation in that before being in graduate school, I had a weekly comic strip out in the Pacific Northwest. And I was interested in a lot of questions around, what comics could do, what they could be. And that kind of pulled me into grad school at a time when I was, like I said, I was doing comics. I was also working on archaeological digs at the time as a map maker and site illustrator. And when they pulled me in, they actually set it up so that I could work on my PhD and still be a working artist in the Houston area. And that's actually part of the background it's part of the stealth background to Comicpalooza University, because what had happened is because I had done that work in the art community, it meant that I had a lot of connections. And so as Comicpalooza University emerged, I had several connections to fall back on. Chief amongst them, John Guess, who when I was there was an arts patron, who's now the founder of the Houston Museum of African American Culture. And we're going to be doing a Comicpalooza University lead-in event at HMAC, which is for Houston Museum of African American Culture, on Juneteenth, because Juneteenth is June 19th. Comicpalooza starts on the 20th. So we're gonna have a group of us come out early. We're gonna do like a little Juneteenth comics forum at HMAC, and then the next day, Comicpalooza University at Comicpalooza.
That's fantastic, man. That's really, really great. Do you have guests lined up and panels lined up of what you're going to be doing? Obviously,
yes. So one of the things that's interesting is probably rewind a little bit to the way Comicpalooza University is structured. Is the idea actually started last year. I had just come off of a different sort of small comic convention that I'd helped co-found, and we just gotten a really nice award from USA Today. And but all of us were kind of thinking, what's next? And I over the pandemic, I'd really reconnected with a lot of the Rice alumni groups online. They saw what I was doing, and one of the people online was the person in the Office of University Affairs at Rice, and he reached out to me, and he was like, hey, I know these guys over at Comicpalooza. We've always thought about how to work with them, but we weren't really sure what to do. Hey, why don't you come in and we can talk? And so he introduced me to the people at Comicpalooza. My first thing was, well, if you're going to work with someone at a comic convention, then you just got to do programming. So we had like 5 weeks notice. I put together 3 panels. And we had, we brought Sakina Young Skaggs out from, she's the She's actually at Stanford University. She's the one of the deans of religious life there.
Oh, wow.
And she also does comics. She also does work on comics, Afrofuturism, and she's a reverend, so she's like actually the Reverend Dr. Sakina Young Skaggs. And then there's also Margarita Kosterman, who she's a professor at Rice, and she's in English and the Center for African American Studies. She does a lot of stuff, a lot of work on the Caribbean. She's incorporated comics into her classes, and it was interesting because at the time she was on maternity leave. So it was one of those things where I had heard about her. I reached out to her. I was thinking, oh, you're not going to come out for this. And she called me back, and we had a really interesting conversation. She was like, she had never been to a comic convention before, and she had, and let alone spoken on a comic panel. And and I just kind of explained to her my philosophy around doing stuff was like, let's have a conversation. It's not about trying to have the perfect presentation so much as to have an engaging conversation.
You bet.
And so she was game. And I was like, wow, like it was like dedication, you know what I mean? Because she was not, I mean, that's not the time you necessarily want to come out and play, right? And then I was also by another colleague. I was connected with Felicia Harris. She's in communications at University of Houston. And then I was also Felicia helped connect me with somebody who I'd seen online and wanted to work with, but I didn't know how to get in touch with, and that was Byron Kennedy. He is the owner. He's the owner of a comic shop. He is the owner of the only Black-owned comic shop in the state of Texas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So what I did was I got us together. We did different combinations to put together 3 panels. One of the things that's interesting about Comicpalooza is they do have breakout rooms on the 2nd and 3rd floor of the George R. Brown Convention Center. But
what are breakout rooms? What are breakout rooms?
They're just like the rooms you would have for like panels, right? So like if you're at San Diego, you go up the stairs, and then you have all those rooms that are the panel rooms.
Oh,
right?
I see. So just physical rooms for panels, you're saying?
Yes.
Go on.
But they also have stages that line the outside of the convention floor. And so the back of the stage is at the convention floor. So you're kind of like, if you're on the stage, you're facing away from the convention floor. And what's really interesting is when you enter the convention floor, they're on the opposite side, but they have these huge banners overhead. So, for example, our panels were on the Sapphire stage, right? And so you see this huge banner that says Sapphire Stage, and underneath it is this stage. And I when I was talking to Russell Reinhardt, he's the programming manager. He was describing it, and I was like, it'd be really cool to just do it on the stage. Let's just be where the people are.
Sure.
Especially when a lot of this is coming out of a commitment to public scholarship and community engagement. And how do you do public scholarship and community engagement if you're up in a room that's not in the center of where things are? I love doing panels. The one downside about doing panels is the people who are at your panels are the people who are seeking you out, right? And what the interesting thing about the stage is that you get people who are just walking by, right? They're not necessarily looking.
Yeah, well,
like
how at C2E2 they have panel rooms, but they also had the stage that was right there next to Artists Alley. So if somebody wants to come over and see your stuff, you're right there. So I get
exactly.
it. Sure. I'm with you.
So they have.
Tell me about the content, Sanford. I mean, I appreciate the architecture, but honestly, let's get to the content of what you guys are talking about at this stuff.
Well, okay, so last year we did our 3 panels. We did one on looking at Black superheroes and Afrofuturism before Black Panther, and started from a series of conversations between myself and John Jennings, where we were talking about how even though we've reached the point where a lot of people know that Black Panther wasn't the first Black superhero, so many people still think of him as such.
I understand. Well, again,
And
public consciousness, certainly.
right.
Go on.
And so I've been particularly interested in looking at Black superheroes in the Black press, and looking at what they mean and how they make us rethink our knowledge around not just around comics, but around science fiction, around literature,
Yeah.
because there are things that were happening with these characters that we usually don't think of as happening until much later. So you've got a character like Bungleton Green, who has a series of stories where he goes into the past, where he's dealing with conjure culture, where they're bringing people back from the dead. I mean, that's straight up, that's the ethnogothic, that's Black horror, right? But we talk about Black horror as if it started in like the 60s and 70s. Bungleton Green, you're talking about the 30s.
I
Right?
know, that's amazing, man. It really is. I mean, the guy I know, of course, and again, I only knew about him about 20 years ago, was the great Matt Baker, the comic book illustrator.
Yes.
And I know he is, and also from the fandom, am I right? Grass Green, wasn't that the fandom artist that was an African American gentleman?
Yes.
And but like you said, no, and that's the great thing. And Stanford, forgive me real fast, I just want to point out, for years, and I know you know this too. In fact, we talked about this at C2E2 when we were hanging out. The great thing about San Diego is they have these academic panels where you do learn about other things that are going on that, again, thankfully, historians like yourself are making us aware of these things. And yes, it really does inform the curious comic book fan that, like you said, this isn't new. And I
Right.
get what you're saying about Black Panther and how it ignited excitement about Afrofuturism. So, but it is great to know this real history. Please continue.
Oh, exactly. And that's what I find really fascinating. I mean, another example is, so Jay Jackson did a run on Bungleton Green. He did the one I just spoke about, but he also did one where Bungleton Green goes in the future and gets his body replaced by basically an android body, right? So he becomes this sort of mix of Superman and Captain America in the future. And it's like, oh, so now we're talking Afrofuturism.
I
But
get it.
it's happening in these comics that people have that people not even forgotten, but people didn't pay attention to,
Sure.
you know.
Do you
And then
have examples of art that you'll be able to show at the panels?
yes,
That's
yes.
great. That's excellent.
So we have some examples. I mean, another thing that I find really interesting is so Jay Jackson also did a lot of illustrations for some of the pulp magazines that helped set the aesthetic for science fiction.
Yes.
So we often talk about Black people as coming to science fiction much later, right? And it turns out, oh no, there was a Black artist who was literally responsible for the aesthetic. Like he was always there. Then you run into other things outside of comics, like W.E.B. Du Bois writing the short story "The Comet," which is one of the first Black science fiction stories, right? You know, that's very different than the way people think. We love Octavia Butler, but people often think of Octavia Butler as almost, she was a trailblazer, but she wasn't the first,
I'm hip.
right?
Yeah, I get it.
And I think it's important to start to realize that, and then start to explore all the other controversies that come out of this, or maybe controversy is too strong of a word, but there's also all Negro comics, and they had, and Lion Man.
Yes.
What's interesting about all Negro comics and Lion Man is that Lion Man is an African American who goes over to the Gold Coast in Africa to protect the Magic Mountain, which is a mountain with these minerals that are really valuable.
Okay. Okay.
So it's basically it reads a lot like Wakanda.
Oh, sure. Of course.
And
Obviously. Yes.
now some
Yeah.
people, and so what's interesting is that there's a whole bunch of, not all, there's quite a few people who after learning that are like, oh, so Stan Lee stole from Lion Man. And I was always a little uncomfortable with that, because I actually spoke to Stan Lee about his creation of Black Panther, and I just never got the sense that there is we can talk about that story some other time, but I didn't get the sense that holds true. But what it did is it made me look back at other characters in the Black press, and then I realized it's like, oh, there's an adventure, the Adventures of Speed Jackson. He goes to Lastonia, which is sort of this hidden African civilization, and he's a Black adventurer, right? And I started to realize once I started looking at this is that, and this is where my archaeological background comes in, is I'm really fascinated by the way the Golden Age appropriates mythology. And what was really interesting to me is that, it's a time where we have this thing called Egyptomania, where everyone was really interested in Egypt, where there's a lot of stuff in the pop culture that was just bleeding out from explorations and discoveries in Egypt. And
Absolutely.
And so what you see is you see Hawkman, a reincarnated Egyptian prince,
Right.
who doesn't quite look like what we think one would look like, right?
No, definitely not.
We've got Dr. Fate. He goes into a pyramid and gets the helmet, right? Rex Mason, becomes Metamorpho.
Yep.
Well, and he's an archaeologist. So
Right.
you've got all of these sort of colonial narratives, right? Where you've got these white superheroes who get their power from these other civilizations and then
Yes.
take that power and protect the homeland, right? It's a really interesting dynamic. And
man.
And once you understand that, and it's not always, and it's interesting because it's not always bad, right? It's kind of where the superhero comes from. The superhero is this weird admixture of the cowboy and notions of the frontier, colonialism. Like there's actually a whole dissertation to be written about that, right? But
Sure.
what I find fascinating is once you start to key into all of the colonial narratives that are just embedded, even in Fantastic Four. I mean, Fantastic Four it's I wouldn't say it's a family that's basically always going into the unknown, right?
Yeah. But I'm not reading that as colonialism. Tell me how it's colonialism.
Well, but it is just this exploration narrative. If you look at the Fantastic Four, like they're always going out and they're searching, and they end up in these frontiers. Sometimes the frontiers are hidden civilizations, like that's how we end up in Wakanda.
Right.
Sometimes
Absolutely.
it's the negative zone, right?
Right.
And so what's interesting is with the Silver Age, you see this incredible displacement of this idea of that other space, the frontier, from being something that is terrestrial on Earth to being something that's off Earth. But it still is the same. It's the still same dynamics in terms of the narratives.
Well, I and forgive me, Stanford, and honestly, I like this because I'd like to actually kind of debate this and say I hear what you're saying in terms of the architecture of the story, that
Right.
it is an unknown world. So I
Right.
can see someone extrapolating that as colonialism, but I would love that would be something I would love to sit down if we could go back in time, literally, and talk to some of the classic science fiction writers and ask them if they were. And I suppose you're right. It's great. I'm processing this as you're saying it. And I can see guys like Jules Verne and H.G. Wells that were probably influenced by those earlier archaeological explorers going to pyramids, uncovering lost civilizations that were buried. And I can see that. So, yeah, I guess I see what you're saying. But, yeah, because also the space stuff, and especially by the time of Stan Lee, I wonder too. And well, you said you spoke to him about it.
Yes.
Did you even take it that far? I mean, I get it for Wakanda, and I could see that being a typical foreign intrigue sort of story, like an Indiana Jones story, going that way. But did you even ask him about the science fiction exploration as being colonialism?
I didn't ask him about that directly, but we actually ended up finding our way there through our discussion of the Fantastic Four. But before I'm going to put a pin in that for just a second. I'm going to say, introduce something else real quick. Is what's interesting about that colonial narrative is then you look over at the Black press. They're still engaged in the same colonial narratives, but what they're doing is there's a switch. So they're creating a counter narrative. So instead of it being a white man going to Africa to take a resource, it's a Black man going to Africa to protect a resourse.
Fantastic.
That's and you great. Also get white characters who get involved in those type of colonial narratives too, but it reads differently because of the overall racial narratives of America. So when I say a colonial narrative, I'm not saying everyone's evil. And what I'm saying is that there's a set structure here. There are a lot of things that are kind of itchy and uncomfortable for us when we
Yeah,
engage that.
sure.
Um, but then also it also becomes something for which people are reacting against. So in the black press, you have these black explorers and these black superheroes that are pushing against, they're actually engaging in the narrative, but they're engaging in it from a different perspective, from a perspective that makes you that makes you approach things a little bit differently. And once you start thinking in terms of narratives and counter narratives, all of a sudden Lion Man just makes complete sense in the time. What's happening with Speed Jackson makes complete sense in the time. If you are coming at it from the perspective of we don't want this narrative to to result in the theft of something from
I get it.
people, then we're
Yeah.
going to do that differently, right?
Yeah.
So
No,
fast forward. So I would argue that Fantastic Four has it's just like I said, it's just so built around this idea of the Swiss Family basically Swiss Family Robinson with
sure.
superpowers. They're going to places. A lot of times they're kind of bringing their vestiges of ideas of civilization, and then what happens is sometimes whatever they encounter gets mad at them and follows them back home.
No, I
Right?
get that.
You know,
I really, if you haven't already thought of this, and I don't know if we talked about this when we talked at C2E2, but the great Indian writer Ram V, I think, is taking a lot of those classic tropes, doing exactly what you're talking about. And I always point out, and it's my favorite Ram V graphic novel that he made independent of DC and Marvel. It's called These Savage Shores, and it's
okay.
about an 1800s British vampire going to Mumbai and thinking, well, this is going to be great. I'm going to have a feeding frenzy with all these natives. And he doesn't realize that these aren't, ugg natives. And I don't mean that in any disrespectful way. And the Indians, kick the shit out of them. And that's wonderful. And then truly, I appreciate a lot of modern writers taking those pulp tropes and really removing the unpleasant and really uncomfortable
Right.
things, and really taking the same basic structure but putting a spin on it and going, no, guess what, you're the stranger. We're not the strange land, you're the stranger. and
Yes.
and get used to how things work in our land. And I think that's wonderful, and it also reinvigorates, I think, a lot of pulp ideas, and puts them in a much fairer light, and puts everybody on equal footing, I think.
And that's
Or the imbalance of, now the white guy's the guy, like, what the fuck's going on, as well he should be.
But that's what I love about comics. I mean, someone asked me when I this is back when I was doing my dissertation research. They're like, how can you do this? It's like you're reading about and you're writing and you're engaging and you're looking at all these problematic representations, right? And I thought about it and I was like, yeah, but that's the cool thing about comics. What's one of the things that fascinates me about comics is what's offensive today can be transcendent tomorrow if you get with a change in creative teams, with with just like a slightly different approach, right? And yeah, you have a little bit of regression sometimes, but more often than not, as characters are updated over time, they tend to get better. The
Agreed.
arc is that they get better, not worse.
Yes,
And
agreed.
and I find that's one of the things that is really interesting to be able to look at and document and put in perspective. So so what I put a pin in earlier was my conversation with Stan Lee.
Yeah,
Now, mind you, this conversation happened in '06, which
sure.
is long before I started getting into really looking at these colonial narratives in this way, right? But it actually lays the groundwork for how I'm looking at things now. So
Of course.
this is back in the old days. There was we didn't have that social media thing so that
Sure.
we knew how to get in touch with people really easily. And one of the things I would do is I would take my business cards and I would write notes on them to people who I wanted to meet, but I couldn't meet. And I give them to people and say, hey, if you see so and so, give this to them and ask them to call me. And so I just did, it's like, what else do you do? I mean, back then, I mean, the other thing that was interesting when I did my dissertation research, I remember I was with Eric Battle and Jamal Eigel, and we're trying, and I was like, well, I need to create a list of black comic creators. We put together the best list we could, and like there are lots of people left off, like Sean Martinborough, right? Because we hadn't actually met him.
Oh,
And
Sean's
that was the thing.
wonderful. I love that guy.
Oh, I love him too. And but that was the thing. Like before social media, it's hard to explain to people
Yeah.
that you didn't know who was who.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. All we saw was the name on if we got credits on a comic.
Yes.
We didn't know. I didn't know that. Oh God, now I'm blanking. Ron, who did Marvel 2-in-1 and Super Boxers, the artist.
I know who you're talking about.
The chat will help us if we can't think of it on our own. So don't sweat it, man.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing about the chat. But no, man, and yeah, or God, I'm sure people can rattle off like other 70s like Marvel artists that we had no idea. I didn't know Trevor Von Eden was a black gentleman. And he was obviously working on Black Lightning and everything. That's how we learned about him. But even then, it was like, all right, it's some guy with a nice German sounding name.
So there's just this mystery, and without social media, it was like a hunt for phone numbers, and people don't just give out their phone numbers. And
real fast, Sal's pointing out one of those 70s artists, Keith Pollard. Fantastic Marvel artist. Had no idea he was a black gentleman.
Neither did I. I got to say, same here.
Yeah.
So essentially, it was in January. It was when I was at Johns Hopkins, and I was getting ready to leave my office. My daughter was on the way, like my ex, well, now ex-wife, but she was literally like 8.5 months pregnant. So we were like any day, right? So I was rushing to get out of the office, and the phone rang, and it was the landline. And I was like, and I rarely ever answered that landline. And I don't know why, but I answered it. So I pick up the phone, and I'm like, hello. And there's this voice that says, can I speak with Stanford Carpenter? And I was like, who may I ask who's calling? And he's like, this is Stan Lee. And I was silent for a while, and then he's like,
no, Stanford, we are pressed for time. You're the one who told me you got a hard out. So clock is ticking. Get to the story. What did Stan tell you, buddy?
So he shook me out of my awe. There's a long silence. And I asked him about Black Panther. And what's significant about this period of time is that there was no Black Panther movie coming out. There were no stakes around like inflating anything. So it was a really interesting time to interview him. Like there wasn't a party line or anything at that time. And the way he explained it to me was that he and Jack were sitting around trying to figure out how to do a filler story. And it was in between other stories, and they said, oh, and so they just had this idea. They're shooting it around. They're like, they want to do a story with an O. Henry ending.
Okay.
And so they're like, let's have the Fantastic Four. Maybe we'll have them go and seek out some lost civilization. And then when they get there, they're going to find out that they're going to think that they're primitive, and then find out that they're not primitive. That was all they had going into it. And then he went in to describe about how once they did that, then they started to like figure out, well, where do they want that lost civilization to be? And they're like, well, let's have them stay on Earth. Let's stay in this dimension. And he started rattling off. He's like, yeah, we were thinking about maybe like somewhere in Asia, and then we were thinking like South America, and then finally he said he couldn't remember whether it was him or Jack, but he seemed to think more Jack than him. Like, let's do Africa. That's how we got Black Panther. We could have had the brown puma. Right.
Right. Or no, they could have gone to a lost civilization in like you said, Asia, Japan, who's to say, Australia, who knows? Another white culture. Who knows? Although they have Aborigines, obviously.
Exactly. And then he started talking about how Jack's World War II experience was kind of embedded in there, because the army regiment, there's an army regiment or a tank regiment that used the Black Panther as like on the side as like as a symbol.
Yeah.
Right. And what was really interesting about that conversation, because I need to go into all the details, is that is that what came across to me was a development of a of a black character where the fact that he was black was something they only realized towards the end. They're like, oh, so after we see, he was like, yeah, so we figured out all this stuff, and then we were sitting around and realized, oh, this is going to be this is going to be like one of our first black superheroes.
That's great. Well, thank
And
God they thought of that, but keep going. Yeah.
right, but I think that that's one of the things that makes Black Panther special. I think that, because they weren't trying to they didn't sit there and say we're going to create a black superhero. They had this story, and then it got richer and richer. And once they realized what they were sitting on, they didn't run away from it either, right? And so it's having heard that story and having heard him talk about it that way. There was no mention of, oh, we're reading the black press. And I know that at the time that readerships were very segregated, right? People
Absolutely.
were segregated. The color line was also about what media people consumed,
Sure.
everything. And so I reject this idea that Stanley somehow stole from Lion Man. What I realized is that everything about what Stanley talked about had to do with this was the plot that we had. And this is what happened when we threw these ingredients into the mix for this plot. We have this overall plot. This is what happens when you throw Africa in. If you throw Africa in, you got to figure out you're going to be dealing with black people. If they'd done South America, it would be brown people. If it
Certainly.
was and I think that understanding that order becomes really interesting. And ironically, it's that influenced the way I look at colonial narratives. Like, so taking
Okay.
that back,
Sure.
because one of the things that's always been central to my research is, yes, I'm an anthropologist. That's my PhD, but I also spent time as a map maker and site illustrator for archaeological digs. And my original training was in archaeology. So
Okay.
I have this. So I'm very interested in the artifact. I'm very interested in looking at a comic book as something that's made by human hands through human interactions, and that the best of people end up on the page and the worst of people end up on the page. So that's why, like when he tells that story, I start thinking to myself, okay, so what's happening with these other characters, and what are people influenced by? And you don't have to have read another character to still get that vibe, because we are all part of an interconnected culture.
Yeah, I get it. So tell me again, because again, I'm watching the clock, man. Like these panels that you're going to do for Comicpalooza and Juneteenth. What are you planning on discussing?
So okay, so we're gonna do 3 panels and 1 workshop at HMAC on the 19th as our lead in.
Okay.
And the workshop, we've got Michael Dondo coming in from St. Cloud State. He had worked with John Jennings to create a Lion Man comic that has been in the Met. They've also used it to to teach kids how to tell stories,
Okay.
in comics, right? So he's going to be there. We're going to open with a workshop from him. My Sienna Greaves, who you also recently met, she and I are working together on a podcast, and we are doing a podcast episode on Ezra Clyde Jackson. Ezra Clyde Jackson was a black cartoonist in the 40s, and his daughter is Sheila Jackson Lee, or was Sheila Jackson Lee, the congresswoman from Texas. And she actually talks about him, and has entered stories about him in the congressional record.
Wow.
So we're going to take a few snippets from there. In fact, after I talk to you, I'm going to be interviewing Sheila Jackson Lee's daughter.
Oh, great,
Um,
man.
yeah, so we're interviewing the family, and we're going to we want to really talk about his life, because what's interesting is there were black people who were doing golden age characters, but we didn't see them. We didn't know
Yes.
about them until very recently. And then a lot of the white creators went overseas for World War II. When
Right.
they came back, the black artists were displaced.
Just like women. Absolutely, man. No, I
Yeah.
get it. Yeah, that's
and
unfortunate. Absolutely.
and so he doesn't so he basically was pushed out of the comic industry for a decade.
What
He
uh,
co-
what characters was he working on?
He was doing some of the spy and adventure comics. So he was really a part of that genre, and it was
Okay.
and that what's interesting about that genre is they don't have like a set character. It's like they almost go with a new character every
Oh, I
week.
see. What
Um,
were they known Golden Age publishers though? Are these national? Are these timely? Are these tell me the publishers they work for?
I'm going to be honest. I'm
Oh, don't
zoning
worry,
on the
buddy.
name of the
No
publisher,
worries. It's cool. No, and you gave
but I
us a
actually
general,
the funny thing is I have the comic because one of the people who I spoke with about this was in my initial conversation with Ken Quattro, and
Yes,
he actually sent us some of the comics to incorporate, um, and then we're also getting some of the comics from the family. And
great.
so what's going to happen is Sienna and I are going to do a panel focusing on Ezra Clyde Jackson, and then members of the family are going to be there for the panel.
Outstanding.
And so we're going to do that, and then after that there's going to be a panel um looking at African Americans who are on the business side of comics and talking about the business side of comics. So like John Jennings is going to be on that panel, but he's not
Wonderful.
going to be talking about his art. He's going to be talking about Megascope and the creation of Megascope,
Sure.
the imprint for Abrams Comic
Absolutely.
Arts.
Yes, yes.
We got Byron Kennedy talking about about owning a comic shop, and
Great.
then we've got Bill Campbell from who's the founder of Rosarium Publishers. And so it's a
Are they an
small publisher.
Afrofuturist publisher? Go on.
Yeah. So we've got so we're gonna have them give that other side,
Terrific.
because this is also happening during a family day. So there's gonna be a lot of people for whom comics are new to them. And then we're gonna end the day on a Lion Man panel. And it's gonna be because John and Bill are working on another Lion Man comic.
Excellent.
And then you've got Mike Dondo, who's going to be there as well on that panel. So it's going to be all Lion Man all the time for an
That's
hour.
great. That's a great idea too, man. And again, Golden Age character in the public domain now. Lion Man?
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful.
And
Wonderful opportunities to take an established character who has this interesting history and put a new spin on. That's wonderful, Grant.
and then
Wonderful.
and then the next day, Comicpalooza. Comicpalooza is going to be hella fun. We've got 16 panels over 3 days, all on the same stage. So it's going to be like it's really going to be like it's going to be like it's the Sapphire Stage. And we're hoping next year that we can get it renamed the Comicpalooza stage,
I
because
understand.
we want to
Yeah,
just
well,
like we want to colonize it.
I understand that. No, we got the iconography. So yeah, man, let's make this happen. So give us an idea of some of the panels that are coming up.
So I mean, one thing that's great is one of the things I focused on is having a third of the panelists be Houston-based academics, a third be Texas-based but not in Houston, and then a third be national.
Okay.
So that we'd have like a really solid mix, So one person who's going to be doing multiple panels is Shelley Clevenger. She is the chair of the Victim Studies Department at Sam Houston State University. It's a one-of-a-kind department, and what it is it looks at criminal justice issues from the perspective of the people who are victims of crimes. She's a psychologist. There's going to be a panel that she's going to be doing. She also does a lot of stuff, cool things with toys. She's doing a panel called Wicked Women,
Okay.
which is inspired kind of by Wicked, but it's going to look at
Sure.
that archetype
Sure.
in comics.
Yeah.
She's also doing another comic looking at sort of the psychology of heroes and villains. And of course, there's going to be a strong victim studies perspective that's going to be embedded in there. And then she's doing a panel on with the Houston Toy Museum. And they're going to be talking about toys. And they're going to be talking about toys, pop culture, what it means for people. We've got the Reverend Dr. Sakina Young-Skaggs coming back. She's going to be doing 2 panels. She's going to be doing a panel focusing on religion and mythology in comics.
Okay.
And she'll be doing that with Kevin Garcia and Mark Nazel. And then we've also got her working on a panel on it's going to be looking at both Afrofuturism and Latinx futurism.
Beautiful.
So she's going to be with Tanisha Taylor, who is at Texas Southern University. Um, and we got Luis Valderas, who's an artist who did this amazing these amazing set of exhibitions on on Latinx history
Great.
and then also but also looking at the space race and NASA, and it's just gonna be a wonderful panel, wonderful discussion.
Beautiful.
Um, we've got Mike Donald's going to be teaming up with Diamond Beverly Porter, and they're
Okay.
going to be doing a roundtable, literally just talking about gaming and avatars and what
Oh,
they
nice.
mean, and not just what the avatars mean, but what they mean for possibilities in terms of people who are working on community.
Okay.
Like how people form communities around these types of makings.
Okay.
Um, I left a couple of spots until the last minute because I wanted to make sure we had a couple of things that were really tied into something recent. And so our late entry panel it's called "We Are All Sinners," and
I
it's
was
on
wondering if Sinners
sinners.
was going to figure into this. Go right ahead,
Yep.
man.
So I mean, of course, John's going to be there. John and I have always had a longstanding interest in Black horror, and we co-created the term the ethnogothic. So we're going to be on that panel, but we're also going to have Felicia Harris who's going to be with us. She's amazing. She's over at University of Houston downtown. Sakina is going to be, or the Reverend Doctor is going to be there as well on that panel. It's going to be a hoot.
That's cool, man.
It'll just be
Yeah.
like a nice little discussion. The panels that are happening at HMAC are also gonna be versions of them are gonna be at Comicpalooza itself as well. Another panel that I think is gonna be really fun is we're doing a panel all on public domain characters.
Smart.
And like what you can and really talking about different types of public domain projects. So Lion Man will be a part of it, but there's gonna be other stuff added as well.
Am I right, Sanford? Is amazing. Was Amazing Man always a Black hero?
You know?
Because I know that, again, for people who don't know who we're talking about, Amazing Man has been featured over the years at both DC and Marvel. And I
Right.
know that at DC during the early 2000s in the JSA, they had a version of Amazing Man, and he was a Black gentleman,
Right.
and which was great. And I didn't know if because again, this is one of those public domain golden age heroes that anyone could really do a new story about. But yeah, I didn't know if he was one of them. Can you give a short list of some of the other public domain heroes that are available and people can start thinking about and hopefully attending your sessions as well?
Well, I'll say, I mean, Lion Man is an awesome one. There are a lot of them are very much unheard of, and now I'm zoning
Okay.
it.
Oh,
I'm
no,
so
no.
sorry.
It's not, no, man. Hey,
Um,
listen, you got a week and a half to get ready for Comicpalooza, so that's all right, man. And when you do your big stuff here and everything, so that's okay. No problem. And then if anything, after the fact. By the way, quick, you mentioned Ken Quattro. What was the name of his book that talked about a lot of great Black comic artists and stuff in the Golden Age?
Oh, it was Invisible Men.
Invisible Men. Thank you, man.
Yes,
Yes,
it was a great book. I wrote the
excellent
intro
book.
for it as well.
Oh,
Um,
Sanford, I had no idea. By the way, real
yeah,
fast, because I want to put this out, and we don't, again, I'm gonna make you available for your thing, but I was telling you 45, and we go a little longer than that. But Sanford is one of the talking heads in here it is, the Legend of Kingdom Come documentary. So it's great to see that and everything, man. And of course, I was part of that as well. So there's my fat ass face.
that
But
was so much fun. I mean, I'll never forget. Like, I don't know when you were interviewed, but I just remember it being really cold out.
it was incredible. Well, literally, I was done and I was out the door, and you and I ran into each other on the
Yes.
street as you were walking in. And that's the first time. No, because you were on for a panel years ago that we did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm like, hey, man. How you doing? And I was so glad that Sal and Renzi thought of including you in the thing. Hey, man, you know what you're talking about. You're a great comic book historian. So
Well,
beyond the mad thinking.
it was really fun. It was such a pleasure. And it was also, I mean, being at that opening not long ago was really fun too, to actually see it on the big screen. You're
Yeah.
like, oh.
Absolutely. Oh, and I apologize, Stanford. I've been calling you with that Stanford instead of Stanford occasionally, so I apologize for that, man.
Oh, no
People,
worries, no
usually
worries at
people get
all.
my last name wrong, so I apologize for that. That's terrible. I will, and also I'll fix the title on the YouTube as well. But
Okay.
don't the audio will be correct, I promise, no matter what. But man, I'm really excited for you, man, and I'm so glad you're bringing awareness of Lion Man and the way you all are using Lion Man to not only tell new stories but as a teaching tool as well. I think that's brilliant.
Well, it's going to be really fun. I mean, one of the things that's interesting is that I sat down and tried to do the breakdown of this and of what Comicpalooza is, and it it really hit home when I just put it in crash terms. I'm like, we've got 16 panels featuring 36 academics, scholars representing 18 different universities. We've got three major media outlets that are represented as well. We've got a museum, we've got a comic shop, we've also got a medical practice that's represented. I mean, we've just hit so many cylinders with this, in terms of just having people who are really diverse in terms of where they're coming from, in terms of discipline, in terms of identity, in terms of where they're even like the nature of the place that they're working. It's going to be really fun,
Cool.
and when you have 16 panels, you really have time to really look at things like we actually have a panel that's going to be on Caribbean comics,
Wonderful.
and it started as a conversation. We realized that there's actually a lot. It's almost like the Jamaicans in track. It's like this little small island that's producing a lot of people. If you look at the comics that are coming out of the Caribbean and the creators that are coming out of the Caribbean, it may not seem like a lot in terms of the number of comic creators in America, but once you factor in size, they are having an outsized impact.
That's
You know,
wonderful, man. That's like a lot of the, and now shame on me, Manny Pacquiao's people, and I'm blanking. Darn it, because all the wonderful Pinoy artists in the
yeah,
'70s, the
yeah, the
Philippines artists.
Philippines.
Yeah, all right, there we go. I knew the map maker would know what I was talking about, but no, truly, I mean, that was the great thing, and it's like, oh my god, and we got all these incredible Pinoy artists and everything, and it's like we didn't know, but obviously, I'm sure they were kicking ass in the Philippines, and I'm sure that was the case in the Caribbean and stuff.
Yeah, and
That's
that's that
amazing.
that's what's really cool is realizing that even as we think in terms of American comics and what's being published in America, and sometimes we forget that the idea of America is being created by more than just Americans.
Of course. Well, and also don't forget, and truly, I hear what you're saying, and I think it's important for representation and people to know where people come from. But I also believe in the 20th century edict of, hey, we're all here, we're all
Yeah,
Americans. So
exactly.
I mean, and that's wonderful. So truly, Lion Man's story is an American story, and
Yes.
needs to get that prominence that the Marvel heroes and the DC heroes have. So why not?
And I think the other thing that's interesting is I actually think that we are in a really interesting golden age in terms of the diversity of superheroes.
hundred
And,
percent.
and it's
Yes,
and it's and it's because it all comes back to really around 2006, 2008, the introduction of the iPhone and the touchpad interface, where we get tablets, and now all of a sudden people can create a comic from soup to nuts on a tablet that they can
you bet.
afford, as
Yeah,
opposed to the old days when you had to like make the zines and basically own a press, right?
I'm
We've
hip.
got we also got print on demand around that time. So we have such a vibrant independent comic scene in which people are entering comics with no desire to work for Marvel or DC, which
You're
is
absolutely right.
which is amazing, which opens up amazing possibilities. It used to be, if you think about it, 10 years ago, there was the demand for Marvel and DC to create characters that were different. And now what's happening is those different characters are being created amongst the independent comic creators, and then Marvel and DC are following.
You damn right.
you know,
Absolutely, man.
I
No,
think
I hear you.
I think it's a really interesting dynamic. But I think that just what it means for everybody being able to see themselves and tell their own stories, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I think that what it also means is that now we have it's like that wealth has created a new set of problems. Now it used to be the problem was making a comic. Now the problem is distributing it, right?
Well,
But
but then again, you don't even need a physical comic if you can get your ideas out through the web,
right.
build an audience, and then, hey, by the way, you liked what I did online? Well, now I've collected it, or now I've got a new graphic novel. Please come by. You've enjoyed the web
Yep.
comic. You created the community. So no, man, I think you're right. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's I've been studying comics for a very long time, and um when I look at actually when I look at a lot of other scholars, what's interesting is like watching them be really excited about something and then getting bored with it. And what's really cool is the comic industry has changed so many times that what I'm studying now is so different than what I was studying before, but I'm still within the same industry. Like right now, what
Right.
I think is amazing is what's happening with cosplay and what's happening with comic conventions as like a space, as an architecture that actually creates that creates a space for a type of imagination that we just couldn't that there wasn't room for.
The corporations would not support or think in those terms.
Right.
But now all these people independently are making their own games and doing these
Yep.
other things. And therefore, the opportunity is there. And you don't need a corporate structure to make it happen.
Exactly.
I'm with
Exactly.
you, man. No, I'm absolutely with you. All right. I'm looking at the clock because I know you got this interview you got to do at 9. So we
Yeah.
can wrap up. But honestly, Stanford, this has opened up some other ideas that I'd like to discuss with you either after Juneteenth and whatever, but we can still do it in June or later in the year. But yeah, because I know there are a lot of other creators out there that are doing independent things, and I'd like to know if you've been talking to them and what your thoughts are on those too. So yeah, you gotta come back and talk
Oh,
more with it,
for sure, for sure. And one thing I'd like to give a quick shout out
please.
to what's interesting about Comicpalooza University is it is the name Comicpalooza University came kind of late in the game. But it started as, let's see if we can do some panels, let's see if we can get more academics involved, and let's see if we can involve them in a different way, right?
Sure.
Let's really look and explore at what public scholarship and what community engagement can look like. It's not that it's necessarily new that you have academics talking about comics, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to do it just with
A little more
in a
fun.
different vibe.
Yeah,
We're
let's go.
trying to build community, and we've had some people who've been incredibly helpful. The Houston Museum of African American Culture, they have done a lot to support CN and I developing the podcast. We've gotten some incredible support behind the scenes, sort of at the last minute, to make things possible by the Rice University Center for African and African American Studies. Like they like popped up with a little bit of support that kind of pushed us over the edge for some of our programming.
Great.
We've also got and this is going to sound like like almost out of the way, but the person who's the main seller in the US for Sherp, which is it's actually it's an all-terrain vehicle. It can actually go on land and in water, and it's used for a lot in the US. It's used for search and rescue.
Okay.
Um, so Sherp and Scott McKee, they've also been really helpful behind the scene as
Oh,
well.
wonderful.
And then of course there's the people at Comicpalooza who've just really embraced this. I mean, we actually have our own little landing page on the Comicpalooza site. They had their people develop the logo for us. So this is, you know, this is kind of a dream thing for me to do, because I'm really interested in exploring different options for programming, different ways of thinking, different ways of doing scholarship, different ways of making. But it's ultimately a group effort,
That's beautiful.
and it's been really great.
Dude, that sounds amazing. So again, the seminar prior to Comicpalooza is June 19th. And
Yes.
then June 20th, you're going to have 3 days of panels, and
Yes.
give the location again.
It's at the George R. Brown Convention Center in Houston, Texas.
Beautiful.
And in addition to the stage, we're also going to have two booths, one for sales and one for community engagement. So hopefully by next year we're going to dress everything up so it'll look like a little mini campus.
I'm hip. Well, there you go. Again, here's the conceptual art for such a campus and everything. There you go, man. No, that's great, Stanford. Honestly. And again, our conversation today is inspiring more conversations I think I want to have with you. So please come back when you're not hard pressed for time, and we'll talk more. That'd be great.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm always happy to make people aware of things of like what you're doing. So I think that's really terrific. Thanks everybody for listening and watching. I'm trying to think in my brain. Do I have anybody else scheduled for the week? Not right now. But June's going to be great. Lots of cool people coming up on Word Balloon. I hope you'll join us. Until next time, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.